You got one game and you got to get out of here.
Go sit down.
Like, I'm not here to make friends. Y'all suck. We're OU.
Welcome back to Balanced Sports, the show where we work to level the playing field across the gender spectrum regarding sports coverage. I'm Jewelz.
I'm Hunter.
And today we are talking.
You crushed that intro. That was so good. Hallelujah.
Today we are talking about college softball.
Ding, ding, ding. So excited to talk some softball. Now tell us, what are your qualifications for talking about softball today?
I played softball for like 7 years. End of sentence.
Position?
I was a catcher.
Yeah, you were.
I was a 2-time Little League All-Star, so put some respect on my name.
Okay.
Light flex. What about you? What are your qualifications for talking about softball?
I had a cousin that was a D1 level kind of softball player. And growing up around that cousin, I would often be around when she was doing pitching lessons. I learned how to pitch softball, I would say decently well. And I would go to the softball practices and pitch active live batting practice to the women's softball team. So I love softball. I find the game really fascinating. I really love the pitching styles. And much like everything we do on the show, I have zero accolades that would really qualify me to talk about this, but we love this sport, so we're gonna do it anyway.
You're welcome. Let's start with how championship softball works. There are 64 teams that make the bracket. They go for 5 rounds of double elimination.
There's going to be 64 teams, 32 automatic, 32
at-large bid.
Thank you, at-large bids. Teams get placed, 4 teams at one spot, one regional, and then you're only going to have one team leave that region. So essentially, it's a double elimination tournament until one team is remaining.
The 32 at-large bids are decided by coaches.
They're from schools all over the country, and some of them aren't even head coaches in softball. So they're all kind of trying to keep an eye on these teams throughout the year, and they have to kind of make that decision at the end. Who are these 32 teams and who are going to make the team, and who are those on the bubble? Who's not going to make the NCAA tournament?
Now, do you think that this process is quote unquote fair? Do you think there's a better way to do it besides voting teams in by committee?
I like the committee aspect of it. I don't think that they've done it fair historically. We'll talk about that later. The bracket just never makes sense. And a lot of people, I think, are up in arms when they see any bracket, whether that be basketball or softball, whatever sport. Softball just seems to be the most glaringly like, what were y'all doing this year? But
how did we get here?
I'm not on that committee, so I get there almost every year with softball.
I think committee work is thankless. I think it is also generally volunteer run. And the more people on the committee, it's better to have more people. That way you don't have just the big conferences coming in and saying, yeah, our team deserves or whatever. So having more people across different regions to kind of go to bat for some other programs and to make a good case of how you can have a more well-rounded selection process, I think is a benefit. So fair, probably not, and life's not fair, but doing the best.
I don't know if I've been as specific, maybe seeing those teams that are right on the bubble. And that's always, I think you can always make a case for those. The seedings is what really throws me off here. If the seeds hold, the games work out the way they're supposed to. You should have the 1 facing the 16 seed, 2, 15, and so on. The top 8 seeds would end up hosting those super regionals now. So you have 16 teams remaining. One team is going to come out of that super regional. That round is the best 2 out of 3 series.
The other 32 teams that are present in the tournament get there from conference championship wins.
Awesome. 32 at large, 32 conference champions. So you have 16 teams in the super regional. Obviously, one team is going to come out of each of the 8 super regionals. That would comprise your 8 teams that make the College World Series. That is played every year at ASA Hall of Fame Stadium in Oklahoma City. That just had some amazing renovations. If you've never been, Oklahoma City is kind of it's a city. The amount of fans they pull every year is incredible. And I could imagine if my team was playing OU in the Women's College World Series, I'd be like, this is a home game for them. I don't know how fair this is. But then you watch it as a fan and a spectator and you're just like, it's so passionate. The fans are so packed. So I always think the atmosphere at the Women's College World Series is just like top notch. It's so incredible. It's packed. I've been 2 or 3 times.
That's awesome.
I talked to Holly Rowe in person way back. It was a big time. I was like, I'm going to grow up to be a sports reporter. Can I ask you some questions?
And
Mama wasn't hearing it.
look at you now.
Reporting from my basement. Serving you basement news realness.
Should we get into some history of the WCWS?
Ooh, yes. Let's get into some deep dives of some history. What's the most successful team in NCAA softball?
So that's going to be the UCLA Bruins. They won the first championship in 1982 against Fresno State, and they have 12 championships to their name.
12 championships.
Come on.
Yeah.
That's really impressive.
Pretty big number. And you know who number 2 is on the list of all-time championship?
Arizona.
Arizona is the softball program. It's
They
like
are that girl.
It's like UCLA, Arizona. I mean, they're like, I think what UCLA has 2 more championships than them.
Mhm.
Mike Candrea was the head coach at Arizona since forever. Like since I think the beginning of their softball program. He just retired this last year and was, I think when he retired, the all-time winningest coach in NCAA history. Mike Candrea has been the head coach for multiple Olympic rosters. And when he retired this year, his lead assistant, Caitlin Lowe, who was a multiple-time All-American, one of the best softball players ever, she took over the head coaching position.
That's something that I really love to see. Like when you have the head coach that's, built the program, does really well, and has an assistant coach that's been there for a long time, and then the assistant coach is promoted to head coach. I really like that from promoting from within. I think it keeps it consistent for the players, and I think that's a really good way to do it. So back to UCLA, the last time they won a championship was 2019.
Mm-hmm.
Against who?
They won against Oklahoma. They had Rachel Garcia, who ended up making that Olympic roster. She was the Honda Cup Player of the Year. Pitcher who would just like shut your team out, and then she would get up to plate and knock a home run. So she wasn't fair.
Who is most surprising to see in the like a Cinderella story? Like who in the recent history has come through the tournament and you're like, oh, good to see you here. Never seen you before.
Because we have the double elimination thing in the women's softball tournament, which like maybe we should talk about that. Every other tournament, you got one game and you got to get out of here.
Go sit down.
Like, why do you get to have 2 chances to do this?
I'm not a fan of it. I'm much more of a fan of you have one opportunity. Like you have to bring your A game this day and that's it. I really don't understand why the multiple ones.
I would say a Cinderella team as of recent would be James Madison, for instance, last year.
Come on, JMU. I will, just so we're clear, I will root for every Virginia school. Continue.
Thank you for telling me that they're in Virginia. Didn't know that. James Madison, they beat Oklahoma, who was the number 1 seed at the Women's College World Series. And then unfortunately, Oklahoma came all the way back through the losers bracket to beat James Madison twice in order to make the championship game. But those are always really cool stories. You think of these mid-majors. They had an incredible pitcher, JMU and Odyssey Alexander last year. Also just take a moment to say we're thinking of the JMU staff right now. They lost an incredibly important member of their program, and our hearts are going out to that team and their family. But when you look at seeds and see, okay, there's a team here that doesn't have any number next to their name, that's always a really cool thing to see.
So speaking of the numbers, what happens when you're in the tournament and you're at the site and the 2 ranked teams don't win? So if they lose, where do you go from there? The
committee decides which one of those teams or where is the best place to hold y'all's super regional. I have been looking through it and I can't find a single instance where there's been 2 unranked teams meet in softball. Maybe it's happened in baseball. If it has, comment and we'll go back and research that, talk about it on the next one.
That's very interesting that like it has never, we couldn't find anything that said it ever happened before. I think that really speaks to the rankings being right most of the time. Maybe
what we're seeing in this is that the higher placed team or the better team is going to end up winning after all. They may lose 1 game in that regional, but the fact that they have the ability to play through a double elimination maybe gives them a little bit more chances.
Getting the opportunity to play more definitely gives you more chances. And I don't necessarily think that's fair, but whatever. Nobody asked me.
The reason we're starting to talk about softball today is, for one, we like it. We like to watch it. We like to talk about it. So we thought we'd bring it to the channel. Number 2, it's a really important time to get into softball. They have maybe 1 or 2 weeks, depending on which conference you're looking at, before the regular season ends, and then they'll start conference play. These games right now are really important because they're not just dictating your conference seeding, who you're going to be playing in these really tough conference brackets. The NCAA selection committee has their eyes on a lot of games right now, and they specifically will look at, how you're doing to close out the season. So you want to come into postseason play on a high note. Every team does, but especially these top 16 seeds. You're really trying to show right now why you're deserving to host regionals and or super regional.
Who are the best teams at the top right now?
We would be remiss if we didn't start with Oklahoma as the overall number one. They just lost their first game of the season to Texas on the day that Texas retired Kat Osterman's number. Can you tell I'm a homer over here? I am a UT alumni, in case you have not figured that out. So I'm going to be talking about them probably ad nauseum. OU has the number one pitching staff in the country. They have the lowest ERA in the country, and then as a staff. And then they're the number one batting average, and I believe like top 10 in fielding percentage. So, find the weakness. The thing about OU softball team is you look at every one of these girls and you're just like, they're going to dominate us. They'll get up to bat, and their catcher, Kinsey Hansen, swear to God, must be 6'4". Like, I'm just like, I wouldn't pitch to her. I would be nervous. I would be a nervous wreck. Every player is capable of hitting home runs. Every player is capable of hitting for power, knocking in RBIs. Then they're fielding percentage is incredible. If you're even able to hit the ball off of their pitchers, it's wild.
And they won last year.
They did win last year. Yeah, Oklahoma now has 5 championships. They have, I think, 3 in the last several years.
So quite the dynasty they're building.
They're building a dynasty right now. What's really cool to see about this, I personally think Patty Gasso is just building a championship culture. Players are wanting to go there, not just because of the success, but it's just girls that I feel like want to be so good at softball that they're like, I live, breathe, eat, sleep this game. Like, I'm not here to make friends. Y'all suck. We're OU. Sit down, be humble.
Coming in singularly focused for, 4 to 5 years is what it requires. It's a lot of sacrifice to compete at the top level, but that's what you have to recruit for. Those people who, want to have fun, but having fun means working extremely, extremely hard at your craft. According to ESPN.com, Oklahoma's number 1, Virginia Tech, another Virginia school, is number 2, UCLA is number 3, Florida State is number 4, and Arkansas is number 5 in the rankings.
We were talking about this a moment ago, but historically, I feel like softball has been a game, you tell me from your little league days, that has been dominated by one pitcher on the staff. And not to say that they don't have other pitchers, but what I really like about this year and area I'm noticing softball going is all of these schools have pitching staffs. So they'll bring multiple girls in, maybe depending on the matchup versus the hitters and teams that they're playing. But OU pitches by committee. Virginia Tech has 2 incredible pitchers. Not saying they don't still have one girl. Jordy Ball would be that girl, for instance, that OU is going to go to on maybe the biggest game or in a clutch moment. But these teams all have really important staffs that they have leaned on throughout the season so far.
That is different from my little league days. Okay. I think that's important for the rest and the health of the player to have a committee to support them. And it just makes you a more lethal team that you have options.
Definitely.
Yeah.
What I like about the way the women's bracket works out is after, you could say each round, I guess, is your slate's wiped clean. So you could essentially be the champion of NCAA softball having 1, 2, 3, 4 losses on the season. In postseason play, you can lose 4 times and still be the champion.
To me,
that is
because
really incredible.
Most of the things I watch is like, when you lose, you're done. Bye-bye. So that's pretty wild that you can lose that many times and still be considered the best. I guess even just the way I said that is true. Like you don't have to be perfect in order to still be the best. So maybe that's an argument for why it is a good thing to have multiple opportunities, because that's more accurate to life. Yeah. Anything else?
Feel this. I'm throwing this at your kneecap right now.
No. God, no.
When people get hit by a baseball or softball and jog merrily to first base, the nerve, the audacity, you are a different level of human than me. I am crying on the spot. I'm grabbing that spot. I will need to be taken out the game. Probably seeing like expert medical advice.
I'm injured. I'm hurt. I'm all of the things. Please take me out.
I'm all the things. Well,
I think that concludes our episode this week. I'm excited to get in to softball and watch more games and talk about it with you on Balance Sports. I'm really excited.
As you've seen, we've covered mostly women's basketball right now, NCAA and the WNBA. But at Balance Sports, we are trying to cover more than just basketball. We love some softball, and we wanted to make sure and just touch on it a little bit before the season really got geared up and postseason play got started. So we'll jump back in next week with some WNBA coverage right before the season gets underway. For Balance Sports, I'm Hunter.
I'm Jewelz.
Thanks for watching.
Or welcome back to Balance North.
Oh, are we going to get our own theme song?